The elegant cream envelope arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, my father's familiar handwriting, spelling out my address in careful strokes. Inside, gold-embossed lettering announced his 60th birthday celebration at Grandview Resort. My heart lifted until I reached the fine print, sophisticated evening event. No plus ones for single parents. Before I could process the words fully, my phone rang. Jessica's voice cut through the silence with practiced condescension. "We discussed this extensively, Patrick. The family wants an elegant night without childcare drama or awkward explanations about your situation. Mom agrees completely." I stared at 7-year-old Emma, coloring quietly at our kitchen table, her tongue poking out in concentration. Feeling that familiar sting of family rejection wash over me like ice water. 3 days later, I found myself staring at my laptop screen during what Jessica had termed the planning conference. My parents appeared in their living room, Dad looking slightly uncomfortable in his weekend polo shirt, while Mom adjusted her reading glasses. Jessica dominated the frame from her pristine home office, Derek hovering behind her with his arms crossed. A PowerPoint presentation filled half the screen, complete with color-coordinated slides and bullet points. As you can see, Jessica began clicking to slide number 4. We've secured the premier lakeside dining hall at Grandview Resort for Saturday evening. The venue features panoramic mountain views, a dedicated sommelier, and acoustics specifically designed for intimate conversation. Her presentation continued with military precision. Details about the live jazz quartet, the 7-course tasting menu crafted by a James Beard-nominated chef, and the carefully curated guest list of 43 attendees. This is a milestone celebration. Derek interjected, his insurance salesman smile never wavering. We want Dad to feel truly honored, surrounded by sophistication and meaningful connections. No distractions, no complications. He gestured toward Jessica's laptop as she advanced to the next slide, which featured photos of elegant table settings and crystal stemware. I cleared my throat, attempting to inject reason into their orchestrated presentation. I understand the vision, but surely we could find a solution that includes Emma. The resort must have childcare services, or I could arrange for a sitter to stay in a separate room nearby. She's incredibly well-behaved, and Dad loves spending time with his granddaughter. Jessica's expression hardened, her perfectly applied makeup unable to mask her irritation. Patrick, this isn't about Emma's behavior. This is about maintaining the appropriate atmosphere for a sophisticated adult gathering. We've already confirmed with the resort that this will be an exclusively adult environment. Adding children changes the entire dynamic. What if I only attended for the dinner portion? I suggested scrambling for compromise. Emma could stay with her mother that evening, and I could join you for just the main celebration. I don't need to participate in the entire itinerary. The problem isn't logistics. Derek said, his tone becoming patronizing. The problem is that we've planned this as a cohesive experience. Every element has been carefully coordinated to create a specific ambiance. We can't start making exceptions without undermining the whole concept. Mom finally spoke, her voice carrying that particular inflection she used when avoiding confrontation. "Sweetheart, we just think it would be easier for everyone if you could attend without worrying about arrangements for Emma. You deserve a night to relax and enjoy yourself as an adult, not as a parent constantly managing schedules." The words stung because they revealed how my family viewed my life since the divorce. Every interaction became filtered through their perception of my complicated situation, rather than acknowledging that single parenthood was simply my reality, not a problem requiring their management. Besides, Jessica continued advancing to another slide featuring budget breakdowns. We've invested significantly in creating this experience. The total cost is approaching $12,000, which represents a substantial commitment from all of us. Something cold settled in my stomach as I processed her phrasing. "What do you mean by investment from all of us? I thought you and Derek were handling the planning and expenses." Jessica exchanged a quick glance with Derek before responding. Well, obviously, we couldn't fund something this elaborate entirely from our personal budget. We've been working with Mom and Dad to coordinate family resources. What family resources? I pressed, sensing something important lurking beneath her careful word choices. Mom shifted uncomfortably in her chair before answering. We're using some of the money from Grandpa's estate, sweetheart. Jessica thought it would be meaningful to honor your grandfather's memory by creating something special for your father's milestone birthday. My grandfather, the man who had died 8 months earlier after a brief battle with pneumonia. The grandfather who had spent countless hours teaching Emma to play chess, who had taken her fishing every summer, who had always defended my decisions during family gatherings. The grandfather who had specifically told me during our last conversation in his hospital room that he wanted to make sure Emma's future was secure. I wasn't aware that Grandpa's estate had been distributed yet, I said carefully, trying to keep emotion from my voice. The lawyer mentioned the process could take up to a year to complete. Oh, the final distribution is still pending, Jessica replied with casual dismissiveness. But we've been working with the estate attorney to access funds for family purposes. Since this celebration benefits everyone and honors Grandpa's memory, it seemed like an appropriate use of resources. Derek nodded enthusiastically. Your grandfather would have loved knowing his legacy contributed to bringing the family together for such a meaningful occasion. He was always talking about the importance of family unity and creating lasting memories. The irony struck me like a physical blow. My grandfather, who had specifically worried about Emma's financial security, whose money was apparently being used for a party that excluded his beloved great-granddaughter. The same grandfather who had consistently encouraged me to stand up for myself when family dynamics became unfair. How much of the estate funding is being used? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. We're utilizing your portion primarily, Jessica said, her tone suggesting this was obviously reasonable. Since you've been struggling financially with the divorce costs and single parenthood expenses, we thought it made sense to invest your inheritance in creating something that would benefit the whole family rather than just sitting in an account. The manipulation was breathtaking in its audacity. They had reframed stealing my inheritance as generous family support, positioning themselves as wise stewards protecting me from my own supposed irresponsibility. The money my grandfather had specifically left for Emma's future was being spent on an event that deliberately excluded her. I see, I said quietly, my mind already working through the implications. And this decision was made collectively by the family. We discussed it extensively, Mom said, her voice carrying a defensive edge. Everyone agreed that this was the most meaningful way to honor both your grandfather's memory and your father's milestone birthday. You've had so much on your plate lately, we didn't want to burden you with financial stress on top of everything else. Dad, who had remained silent throughout most of the conversation, finally spoke. Son, we just want you to be able to enjoy the celebration without worrying about money or logistics. Your mother and Jessica have put tremendous effort into making this special. I looked at Emma's artwork taped to the wall behind my laptop, crayon drawings of our family, including detailed portraits of great-grandpa with his fishing hat and kind smile, the same great-grandfather whose legacy was funding a party she wasn't allowed to attend. I understand, I said finally. You're right that this eliminates any financial concerns on my part. I'll plan to attend alone as requested. Jessica's relief was visible. Perfect. We'll send you the complete itinerary and dress code requirements. This is going to be such a wonderful celebration, Patrick. Dad deserves something truly special, and we're going to deliver exactly that. As the video call ended, I sat in my kitchen listening to Emma humming while she colored. She was working on a birthday card for her grandfather, carefully writing, "Happy Birthday, Grandpa," in her best 7-year-old handwriting. Inside, she had drawn a picture of the two of them fishing together, complete with a cooler full of sandwiches and her grandfather's patient smile as he helped her bait her hook. The card would never be presented at his sophisticated adults-only celebration, but I was beginning to formulate a plan that would ensure Emma's great-grandfather's true legacy wasn't forgotten. Monday morning found me in the offices of Blackwood, Harrison and Associates, sitting across from James Blackwood, the estate attorney who had handled my grandfather's will. The building's mahogany-paneled conference room felt formal and intimidating, but James himself was a soft-spoken man in his 60s who had genuinely cared about my grandfather. I'm concerned about some inconsistencies regarding the estate distribution. I began pulling out the notes I'd taken during the family video call. My sister mentioned that funds are being accessed for family purposes, but I haven't received any formal documentation about partial distributions. James frowned, opening the thick file folder bearing my grandfather's name. That's unusual, Patrick. We haven't authorized any distributions yet. The estate is still in the probate process, though we're getting close to final resolution. He flipped through several documents, his expression growing more concerned. Can you tell me specifically what your sister said about accessing funds? I recounted Jessica's explanation about using estate money for my father's birthday celebration, including her assertion that my portion was being invested in the family event. James listened with increasing alarm, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. This is highly irregular, he said when I finished. No funds should be accessed without proper authorization and documentation. More importantly, there seems to be a significant misunderstanding about your inheritance. He pulled out a document I'd never seen before, a detailed breakdown of my grandfather's assets. Patrick, your grandfather's estate is considerably more complex than a simple cash distribution. He was involved in several business partnerships and property investments that he kept quite private even from most of the family. My heart began racing as James spread additional papers across the conference table. Your inheritance includes a controlling stake in 3 different businesses, including Grandview Resort, where your father's party is being held. Your grandfather became a silent partner in the resort 12 years ago, and his shares transferred directly to you upon his death. The room seemed to tilt slightly as I processed this information. I own Grandview Resort. You own 51% of Grandview Resort, James clarified, along with controlling interests in a commercial property management company and a small chain of family restaurants throughout the state. Your grandfather specifically structured these bequests to provide you with ongoing income rather than just a lump sum. He was concerned about Emma's long-term financial security. I thought about my grandfather's frequent comments about building something that lasts and his questions about my post-divorce financial planning. He had never mentioned business ownership, but he had always emphasized the importance of creating stability for Emma's future. Why wasn't I informed about these business interests? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. James looked uncomfortable. Your sister has been serving as the family liaison for estate matters. All communication about the business transfers was supposed to go through her to you. She acknowledged receiving the documentation about the resort ownership and confirmed that she would coordinate with you about assuming your responsibilities. The betrayal was even deeper than I had imagined. Jessica hadn't just hidden my business inheritance. She had been actively communicating with the estate attorney while keeping me completely uninformed. She had spent months positioning herself as the responsible family member, managing complex legal matters while portraying me as too overwhelmed with personal problems to handle such responsibilities. I need to contact the resort immediately, I said. If I'm the controlling owner, I should be involved in any major events or bookings. James nodded. I'll provide you with all the documentation proving your ownership. You'll also want these financial statements showing the resort's profitability. It's been quite successful, particularly during peak tourist seasons. As I reviewed the financial documents, I realized my grandfather had left me far more than I could have imagined. The resort alone generated enough income to ensure Emma's college education would be fully funded with substantial surplus for our daily expenses. The other business interests provided additional security that would allow me to make choices based on what was best for Emma, rather than what was financially necessary. "There's one more thing," James said, pulling out a sealed envelope with my name written in my grandfather's handwriting. He left specific instructions that this should be given to you once you learned about the business inheritance. Inside my grandfather's familiar cursive writing filled 2 pages of his personal letterhead. The letter began with his characteristic warmth but quickly became more serious. "Patrick, if you're reading this, then you've discovered that your inheritance is more complicated than your family probably expected. I've structured things this way because I believe you're the only one who truly understands what family should mean. You've always protected Emma while maintaining your integrity, even when it would have been easier to compromise your principles. The businesses I'm leaving you aren't just financial assets, they're tools for maintaining family relationships on your own terms. I've watched how certain family members try to control others through financial manipulation, and I wanted to ensure you'd never be vulnerable to that kind of pressure. Use these resources wisely, but don't let them change who you are. Emma is lucky to have a father who puts her well-being above social expectations. I trust you to honor both her future and our family's better angels." The letter concluded with specific instructions about contacting the resort manager and assuming active ownership responsibilities. My grandfather had anticipated exactly what would happen, and he had quietly arranged for me to have the tools necessary to protect Emma and myself. I left James's office with a briefcase full of legal documents and a completely different understanding of my situation. Jessica hadn't just stolen from me. She had unknowingly organized my father's birthday party at a resort I actually owned, using money that belonged to me to fund an event designed to exclude my daughter. My first call was to Grandview Resort. The receptionist connected me with David Chen, the general manager who had been expecting my contact for months. "Mr. Sullivan, I'm so relieved to finally speak with you directly," David said, his voice carrying evident frustration. "I've been trying to coordinate with your sister about your ownership transition, but the communication has been quite challenging." What kind of challenges? When I asked, though, I was beginning to anticipate his answer. "Well, she's been making requests and demands as if she represents your interests, but some of her requirements have been quite unusual. For your father's birthday celebration, she specifically requested that we relocate any families with children from the dining areas visible from their private room. She also asked us to ensure that our evening entertainment would be sophisticated and mature, with no family-friendly elements." The picture became even clearer. Jessica hadn't just excluded Emma from the party, she had tried to sanitize the entire resort environment to eliminate any reminder that families with children existed. She also questioned our child safety policies and suggested we might want to implement adult-only time periods in certain areas, David continued. "I explained that we're a family-friendly resort and can't discriminate against guests with children, but she seemed quite insistent. I'll be coming to the resort this week to discuss the transition and review current operations," I said. "I'd also like to understand exactly what arrangements have been made for my father's celebration. Of course, I should mention that your sister has booked the presidential suite for herself and her husband, though I believe she may not be aware that it's actually the owner's private residence. The previous owner always stayed there when visiting, and I assumed you'd want the same arrangement." The irony was perfect. Jessica had inadvertently booked herself into accommodations that actually belonged to me, probably at a premium rate that would be charged against my inheritance money. "Actually, I'll be staying in the presidential suite myself," I said. "Please move my sister's reservation to your finest standard accommodation and ensure she's not charged for the change. I'll handle any questions she might have about the modification." "Understood, Mr. Sullivan. Will you be bringing your daughter? I understand from our previous conversations with your grandfather that he was quite fond of her." "Yes," I said, feeling a sense of rightness settle into place. "Emma will definitely be joining me." As I hung up the phone, I realized my grandfather's wisdom extended far beyond financial planning. He had given me not just the resources to protect my family, but the opportunity to demonstrate what family should actually mean. Jessica's sophisticated, adults-only celebration was about to encounter some very unsophisticated reality. The next 3 days were spent coordinating with David and the resort staff, reviewing business operations and preparing for a confrontation that was 8 months overdue. My grandfather had trusted me to use these tools wisely, and I intended to honor both his memory and his great-granddaughter's place in our family story. Emma was excited about the surprise trip to see Grandpa Harold, completely unaware that she was about to become the centerpiece of a lesson about respect, honesty, and what it truly means to honor someone's legacy. Thursday evening, I drove the 2 hours to Grandview Resort with Emma, chattering excitedly in the back seat about seeing her grandfather and exploring the mountains. She had packed her backpack with coloring books, the birthday card she'd made, and her favorite stuffed elephant, completely oblivious to the family drama awaiting us. The resort exceeded even my expectations. Nestled against pine-covered slopes, with a pristine lake stretching into the distance, the main lodge combined rustic mountain charm with understated luxury. David Chen met us in the circular driveway, his warm smile immediately putting Emma at ease. "Welcome home, Mr. Sullivan," he said, shaking my hand before kneeling to Emma's level. "And you must be the famous Emma I've heard so much about. Your great-grandfather talked about you every time he visited." Emma beamed, immediately launching into questions about whether there were fish in the lake and if she could feed the ducks she'd spotted from the car window. David answered each question with genuine enthusiasm while leading us through the lodge's main level. "The presidential suite is on the top floor," he explained as we rode the elevator. "It has a private balcony overlooking the lake and a separate living area where Emma can play while still being part of any conversations." The suite was magnificent, floor-to-ceiling windows, a stone fireplace, and furnishings that managed to be both elegant and comfortable. Emma immediately claimed the window seat, pressing her nose against the glass to watch boats moving across the lake below. "Your grandfather designed this space specifically for family visits," David said quietly while Emma was distracted. "He always said the most important business happened when families felt comfortable enough to be themselves." Over dinner in the resort's main restaurant, David briefed me on the Saturday evening arrangements, while Emma worked on a new coloring page. "Your sister has been quite specific about the setup. She's requested that we close the lakeside dining room to other guests during their event, despite it being one of our busiest areas on Saturday evenings." "What does that mean for other families who had reservations?" I asked, watching Emma carefully color within the lines of a mountain landscape. "We've had to relocate about 15 families to alternative dining options, some at reduced rates to compensate for the inconvenience. Several guests were disappointed, particularly those who had requested lakeside tables specifically to celebrate their own special occasions." The selfishness of Jessica's demands became even more apparent. She hadn't just excluded Emma from the family celebration, she had displaced other families to create her vision of sophisticated exclusivity. "There's something else you should know," David continued, lowering his voice. "I overheard your sister on a conference call with family members yesterday. She was describing your personal situation in quite unflattering terms." My stomach tightened. "What kind of descriptions?" "She told someone named Sarah that you'd been irresponsible with money during your divorce, that you'd made poor decisions that affected Emma's stability, and that the family had to intervene to protect everyone's interests. She specifically mentioned that you couldn't be trusted with financial planning, and that's why they were managing your inheritance." The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. Sarah was my cousin from Denver, someone I'd always been close to growing up. If Jessica was spreading these lies to Sarah, she was probably telling similar stories to every extended family member who would listen. She also mentioned that Derek's insurance business had been struggling and that this party would be a good opportunity for him to network with your father's business associates, David added. "It seems like they're using your father's celebration for multiple purposes." Emma looked up from her coloring. "Daddy, why do you look sad?" I managed a smile for her. "I'm not sad, sweetheart. I'm just thinking about seeing Grandpa Harold tomorrow." Are you excited about giving him your birthday card? Yes, I drew him with his fishing pole and I wrote a poem about how much I love him. She held up her artwork proudly. Do you think he'll like it? I think he'll love it more than anything else he receives, I said, meaning every word. After Emma fell asleep in the suite's second bedroom, I spent the evening on the balcony with David, planning how to handle the next day's confrontation. The lake reflected the mountain stars, creating a scene of such peace that it seemed impossible to imagine the family storm approaching. Your grandfather often sat in this exact spot, David said. He told me once that he'd learned to distinguish between people who created harmony and people who demanded it. He said the difference usually became clear during family gatherings. What did he mean by that? People who create harmony think about what's best for everyone, especially the most vulnerable family members. People who demand harmony expect everyone else to accommodate their preferences while contributing nothing to the actual well-being of the group. The wisdom felt directly applicable to tomorrow's situation. Jessica demanded harmony by excluding Emma and controlling financial resources, while my grandfather had created harmony by ensuring Emma's security and giving me the tools to protect our family relationship. There's one more detail about tomorrow that you should know, David said. Your sister specifically requested that if any children appeared near the dining area during their celebration, security should quietly relocate them to other parts of the resort. She said it was important to maintain the sophisticated atmosphere they'd paid to create. She wants children removed by security. Those were her exact instructions. She emphasized that this was a premium event and that any disruptions should be handled immediately and discreetly. I thought about Emma's excitement to see her grandfather, her carefully prepared birthday card, and her complete innocence about family politics. Tomorrow, Jessica intended to have security remove her own niece to protect the atmosphere of a party funded by money that belonged to Emma's future. I think it's time for my sister to learn what customer service really means when you're dealing with the actual owner, I said. David smiled. I've been looking forward to this conversation for months, Mr. Sullivan. Your grandfather would be proud of how you're handling this situation. I hope so. He always taught me that families should protect each other, especially the most vulnerable members. Tomorrow we're going to see if the rest of the family remembers that lesson. As I prepared for bed, I checked on Emma one more time. She was sleeping peacefully, her birthday card for Grandpa Harold on the nightstand beside her, completely trusting that tomorrow would bring joy and family connection. I intended to make sure that's exactly what she received regardless of what Jessica had planned. Saturday evening arrived with the kind of perfect mountain weather that made the resort's lakeside setting look like a postcard. Emma and I spent the afternoon exploring the grounds, feeding ducks, and visiting the resort's small game room, where she made friends with two other children whose families were staying for the weekend. At 5 o'clock, I helped Emma into the dress she'd chosen for Grandpa Harold's party, a blue sundress with white flowers that she'd picked out specifically because Grandpa says blue is his favorite color. She carried her homemade birthday card carefully in both hands as we walked toward the main lodge. The lakeside dining room had been transformed into an elegant celebration space. Round tables draped in cream linens surrounded a head table positioned to maximize the mountain lake view. Fresh flower arrangements and flickering candles created the sophisticated ambiance Jessica had envisioned. A jazz quartet played softly near the stone fireplace while guests mingled with cocktails and conversation. I recognized most of the faces: aunts, uncles, cousins, and family friends I hadn't seen since my grandfather's funeral. Emma immediately spotted her grandfather across the room and tugged on my hand. There's Grandpa Harold. Can I give him my card now? Let's wait just a few minutes, sweetheart. Let Grandpa finish talking with his friends first. Jessica appeared almost immediately, looking stunning in a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Her smile faltered slightly when she saw Emma, but she quickly recovered her composure. Patrick, you look wonderful. And Emma, what a pretty dress. Her tone was warm enough to avoid seeming rude, but I caught the slight edge of irritation. "I thought you were coming alone this evening." "Plans changed," I said simply. Emma was so excited about giving Grandpa Harold his birthday card, I couldn't leave her behind. "Of course, but we discussed the nature of this celebration. This really isn't an appropriate environment for children." Emma looked up at Jessica with confusion. "But it's Grandpa's birthday party. I made him a special card." Before Jessica could respond, my cousin Sarah approached with her husband Mike. I hadn't seen Sarah in almost a year, and her greeting felt noticeably cooler than our usual warm relationship. "Patrick, how are you managing everything?" she asked, her tone suggesting she already knew the answer wasn't good. "We've been so worried about you since the divorce." "Actually, things have been going really well," I said. "Emma and I have found our rhythm, and we're both doing great." Sarah exchanged a glance with Jessica that I wasn't supposed to notice. "That's good to hear. Jessica mentioned you've been having some financial challenges. It's nice that the family can support you during this difficult time." The manipulation was beginning immediately. Sarah had clearly been briefed on Jessica's version of my situation, complete with implications that I needed family financial intervention. "I think there may have been some miscommunication," I said carefully. "My financial situation is actually quite stable." "Oh, well, that's wonderful," Sarah said, though her expression suggested she didn't believe me. "Jessica explained about the inheritance trust that's being managed to help with your planning. It sounds like a wise arrangement." Emma tugged on my sleeve. "Daddy, what's an inheritance trust?" Before I could answer, Derek appeared with 2 business associates in tow, clearly using the family celebration as a networking opportunity. "Patrick, I'd like you to meet Tom Bradley and James Morrison from the Colorado Insurance Commission. Gentlemen, this is my brother-in-law. He's been going through some personal transitions, but the family's been helping him get back on his feet." The condescension was breathtaking. Derek was introducing me to potential business contacts as a family charity case, using my supposed difficulties to enhance his own image as a generous family man. Tom Bradley shook my hand with the kind of sympathetic smile usually reserved for disaster victims. "Derek tells us you've been facing some challenges since your divorce. It's great to see family members supporting each other during tough times." "Actually, I'm doing quite well," I said, maintaining my composure for Emma's sake. The divorce was the best decision I could have made, and single parenthood has been incredibly rewarding. James Morrison nodded politely but clearly accepted Derek's narrative over my contradictory statement. "Family support makes all the difference during life transitions. Derek's told us how the family has stepped in to provide guidance and stability." Emma was listening to every word, her 7-year-old mind trying to process why everyone seemed to think her daddy needed help, when she knew perfectly well that he took excellent care of both of them. My father finally spotted us from across the room and approached with genuine pleasure lighting up his face. "Patrick, I'm so glad you could make it. And my beautiful granddaughter." He scooped Emma into a hug that made her giggle. "Happy birthday, Grandpa Harold." Emma presented her card with ceremony. "I made this especially for you." Dad opened the card carefully, his face softening as he read Emma's poem and examined her drawing of their fishing trips together. "This is absolutely perfect, sweetheart. This is the best birthday present I could possibly receive." Jessica appeared at Dad's elbow. "Dad, we should probably start moving toward dinner service. The chef has timed everything perfectly, and we don't want the first course to get cold." "Of course," Dad said, though he seemed reluctant to end his conversation with Emma. "Sweetheart, why don't you come sit next to Grandpa during dinner? I want to hear all about school and your summer plans." "Actually, Dad, the seating arrangements are quite specific," Jessica interrupted. "We've planned everything around adult conversation flow and the restaurant service patterns." I watched my father's face register confusion and disappointment as he realized Emma wasn't included in the seating plan for his own birthday celebration. "Jessica, surely we can adjust the arrangements to include my granddaughter," he said gently. It's really not feasible without disrupting the entire evening, Derek added, supporting his wife. The tables are sized for adult place settings, and the menu wasn't designed with children's preferences in mind. Emma looked from face to face, beginning to understand that she wasn't welcome at her own grandfather's party. Her lower lip trembled slightly, but she was trying hard to be brave. "That's okay, Grandpa," she said quietly. "I can wait for you somewhere else." The moment crystallized everything wrong with Jessica's approach. My 7-year-old daughter was volunteering to exile herself from her grandfather's celebration to avoid causing problems for the adults who had excluded her. "No, sweetheart," I said firmly. "You're not waiting anywhere else. This is Grandpa's birthday, and you belong here with the family." Jessica's composure finally cracked slightly. "Patrick, we've discussed this repeatedly. This is not an appropriate setting for children, and we've spent months planning an adult celebration. You can't simply ignore our arrangements because you've changed your mind about childcare." The conversation was attracting attention from nearby guests who were beginning to turn and watch our exchange. Emma pressed closer to my side, confused and hurt by the tension surrounding her presence. "Besides," Derek added in a lower voice, "this event represents a significant financial investment. We can't accommodate last-minute changes that affect the entire atmosphere we've created." My Uncle Robert approached, having overheard enough of the conversation to form opinions. "Patrick, maybe it would be easier for everyone if Emma could find something fun to do in the game room. The resort probably has activities for children during adult events. Or we could arrange for one of the staff members to supervise her in the lobby area," suggested my Aunt Linda. "That way she's still nearby, but the celebration can proceed as planned." I realized that multiple family members were casually suggesting that my daughter be removed from her grandfather's birthday party to accommodate Jessica's vision of sophistication. They had accepted the premise that Emma's presence would somehow diminish the celebration rather than enhance it. "The resort has excellent childcare services," Jessica added, sensing support from the extended family. "Emma could have a much more enjoyable evening with age-appropriate activities rather than sitting through adult dinner conversation." Emma finally spoke up, her voice small but clear. "I just wanted to give Grandpa his birthday card and tell him about the fish I caught with Great-Grandpa this summer." The reference to my grandfather, Jessica's manipulation of whose money was funding this entire event, hung in the air like an accusation. Dad's face showed growing discomfort as he processed the family dynamics playing out in front of the assembled guests. That's when I noticed David Chen moving purposefully through the crowd toward our group. His expression professionally neutral, but his timing precisely calculated. David approached our family cluster with the polished authority of a seasoned hospitality professional. His timing was flawless, arriving just as the tension reached its peak, and multiple conversations were drawing attention from other guests. "Excuse me, Mr. Derek Harrison." David addressed Derek, directly consulting a tablet in his hands. "I'm David Chen, the resort's general manager. I need to speak with you about a scheduling adjustment for this evening's event." Derek immediately bristled, his insurance salesman instincts kicking into defensive mode. "What kind of scheduling adjustment? Our reservation was confirmed weeks ago, and we've paid premium rates for exclusive access to this dining room." "Yes, sir, I understand your position. However, the resort owner has requested that your party relocate to our Alpine room for the remainder of the evening. It's equally elegant with panoramic mountain views and exclusive access to our outdoor terrace." Jessica stepped forward, her voice rising with indignation. "Relocate? We specifically booked this lakeside dining room because of its ambiance and layout. We've spent months planning every detail around this exact space. I apologize for the inconvenience, but the owner's requests take priority over standard reservations," David explained calmly. "The Alpine room actually offers superior acoustics for your jazz quartet, and the lighting is more flattering for photography." "This is completely unacceptable," Derek declared, his voice carrying across the room as other guests turned to observe the commotion. We have a legal contract for this space, we've paid significant fees for exclusivity, and we're not going to be shuffled around like second-class customers. Dad looked increasingly uncomfortable as the confrontation escalated. Maybe we could discuss this privately. I'm sure there's a reasonable solution that works for everyone. The reasonable solution is honoring our original agreement. Jessica snapped her composure, finally cracking completely. I want to speak with the owner immediately. This kind of treatment is absolutely unacceptable for a celebration of this importance. Emma pressed even closer to my side, overwhelmed by the angry voices and hostile atmosphere. Her birthday card for Grandpa Harold was getting crumpled in her nervous grip. I understand your frustration, David continued with unflappable professionalism. Would you like me to arrange a meeting with the owner to discuss this situation directly? Yes, immediately, Derek demanded. I want to know exactly why we're being treated this way, and I want assurance that this won't affect the quality of service for the remainder of our event. Jessica nodded emphatically. Bring the owner here right now. This is a family milestone celebration, with 43 guests, including business associates and extended family members. The owner needs to understand the level of service we expect for premium rates. I'll also be filing complaints with the State Tourism Board and posting detailed reviews on every travel website, Derek threatened. This kind of arbitrary treatment is completely unprofessional. Dad reached for Derek's arm. Let's not escalate this unnecessarily. I'm sure we can work something out. No, Harold, this is about principle, Jessica declared. We've planned this celebration for months, invested thousands of dollars, and coordinated schedules for dozens of people. The resort can't simply change the terms because they feel like it. My cousin Sarah and her husband Mike had joined the growing circle of onlookers, along with several of Dad's business associates and other family members. The confrontation was becoming a public spectacle that was exactly what Jessica had tried to avoid by excluding children. The owner is actually present at the resort this evening, David informed them. He's been observing the celebration from the presidential suite. I can arrange for him to address your concerns directly if you'd prefer. Perfect, Derek said, crossing his arms in a gesture of aggressive expectation. Tell him we expect an immediate explanation and a satisfactory resolution. We're not going to accept being treated like ordinary customers when we've paid for premium service. Actually, the owner is right here in this room, David said, his professional demeanor giving way to a slight smile. Mr. Patrick Sullivan, would you like to address these concerns directly? The silence that followed was absolute and devastating. Jessica's face went through a rapid sequence of emotions: confusion, recognition, disbelief, and finally dawning horror as she processed what David had just announced. Derek's mouth fell open as he stared at me, his aggressive posture deflating like a punctured balloon. The business associates he'd been trying to impress watched with fascination as the family dynamics exploded into public view. Dad looked completely bewildered. Patrick? What's he talking about? Emma, still clutching her birthday card, looked up at me with wide eyes. Daddy, are you the owner of this whole place? My cousin Sarah stepped backward, her expression shifting from condescension to mortification as she realized the implications of her earlier comments about my financial struggles. I think there's been some confusion about my circumstances, I said quietly, my voice carrying clearly in the stunned silence. David, perhaps we should move this conversation to a more private setting. No, Jessica said, her voice barely above a whisper. This can't be right. Patrick doesn't own anything. He's been struggling financially since the divorce. The family's been managing his inheritance because he can't handle complex financial decisions. The assembled guests began murmuring among themselves, clearly sensing that they were witnessing a family drama far more complex than a simple scheduling conflict. Tom Bradley, one of Derek's insurance contacts, stepped forward with a confused expression. Derek, I thought you said your brother-in-law needed family financial support. There's obviously been some mistake, Derek said weakly, though his conviction was clearly shaken. Patrick, what exactly is David talking about? I looked at Emma still pressed against my side and made my decision. My grandfather's letter had emphasized the importance of using these resources to maintain family relationships on my own terms, protecting Emma while demonstrating what family should actually mean. Grandpa, are you still having your birthday party? Emma asked, completely focused on what mattered most to her. Dad knelt down to Emma's level, his voice gentle despite the chaos surrounding them. Of course, sweetheart. This is still my birthday, and you're still the most important guest here. Mr. Sullivan. David said formally, would you like me to explain the situation to your family? I looked around the circle of faces, some confused, some embarrassed, some clearly calculating the implications of this revelation. Jessica's face had gone pale as she began to understand the magnitude of her miscalculation. I think it's time for some honesty, I said. But first, Emma has something important to give her grandfather. As Emma proudly handed over her homemade birthday card, I prepared to reveal how deeply Jessica's manipulation had undermined our family and how my grandfather's wisdom was about to restore the balance she had destroyed. Dad accepted Emma's card with trembling hands, his eyes never leaving my face as he tried to process the impossible situation unfolding around us. The jazz quartet had stopped playing and the entire dining room had fallen into expectant silence. Emma, sweetheart, I said gently, would you like to sit with Grandpa Harold while Daddy explained some grown-up things to the family? Emma nodded and climbed onto Dad's lap, completely trusting and oblivious to the magnitude of the confrontation about to unfold. Dad wrapped his arms around her protectively, his businessman's instincts clearly sensing that whatever came next would be significant. I pulled out my phone and opened the photos I'd taken of the legal documents James Blackwood had provided. 8 months ago, when Grandpa died, he left me a considerable inheritance. But it wasn't just money. It was a collection of business interests that he'd built quietly over many years to provide security for Emma's future. Jessica found her voice, though it came out strained and defensive. That's impossible. The estate attorney said the business distributions wouldn't be finalized for months. I've been coordinating with him about the timeline. You've been coordinating with James Blackwood. I agreed, swiping to display copies of email exchanges on my phone screen. But you never shared any of that communication with me. Instead, you told me that Grandpa's estate was just a cash distribution that would take months to process. I turned the phone toward the assembled family, showing detailed documentation of business ownership transfers. Grandpa left me controlling interests in 3 companies, including 51% ownership of Grandview Resort. James has been trying to coordinate with me for months, through Jessica, who apparently never passed along any of his messages. My Uncle Robert stepped closer to examine the documents, his expression shifting from skepticism to amazement. Patrick, this shows substantial business assets. These companies generate significant annual revenue. The resort alone provides more than enough income to cover Emma's education and our living expenses. I continued. Grandpa specifically structured the inheritance this way because he was concerned about her long-term financial security. Dad's voice was barely audible over Emma's quiet humming as she examined her grandfather's surprised expression. Son, if this is true, then why were you letting us believe you were struggling financially? Because I didn't know, I said simply. Jessica has been serving as the family liaison with the estate attorney. Every piece of communication about the business transfers was supposed to go through her to me. She received documentation about the resort ownership months ago and confirmed with James that she would coordinate with me about assuming management responsibilities. Sarah stepped forward, her face flushed with embarrassment. Jessica, you told me Patrick was irresponsible with money and that the family had to manage his inheritance because he couldn't handle complex financial decisions. I was protecting family interests, Jessica said desperately, her voice rising. Patrick was overwhelmed with the divorce and single parenthood. Someone needed to ensure that important decisions were made rationally rather than emotionally. Derek looked like he was going to be sick. Jessica, what exactly did you tell the estate attorney about Patrick's situation? I explained that he was dealing with personal difficulties and that the family would help coordinate his business responsibilities until he was in a better position to handle them independently. The manipulation was breathtaking in its scope and audacity. Jessica had systematically positioned herself as my caretaker while hiding the very assets that proved I didn't need caretaking. There's more, I said, pulling up financial records that David had provided. Jessica has been spending my inheritance money without my knowledge or consent, the $12,000 for tonight's celebration that came from my portion of Grandpa's estate. Emma looked up from her position on Dad's lap. Daddy, why is everyone talking about money when it's Grandpa's birthday? Because sometimes grown-ups make mistakes about what's important, sweetheart, I said. But we're going to fix that right now. I addressed the room, including the business associates Derek had brought to impress. For the past 8 months, my family has believed I was struggling financially because my sister systematically hid information about my inheritance. She convinced everyone that I needed financial supervision while secretly using my money for family purposes. Tom Bradley, Derek's insurance contact, looked fascinated by the unfolding drama. Derek, you specifically told us your brother-in-law was a financial liability that the family was supporting out of generosity. I was told that, Derek said weakly. Jessica explained the situation and we all thought we were helping. You thought you were helping by excluding Emma from her grandfather's birthday celebration? I asked. By spending her great-grandfather's legacy on a party she wasn't allowed to attend? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Emma's presence on Dad's lap made the cruelty of the exclusion impossible to ignore. The sophisticated adults-only atmosphere Jessica demanded came at the cost of displacing other families from their reserved tables. I continued. David had to relocate 15 families to alternative dining options because Jessica insisted on exclusive access to the lakeside room. My Aunt Linda looked genuinely shocked. Jessica, you displaced other families. I was creating a special experience for Dad's milestone birthday, Jessica protested. Every detail was planned to honor him appropriately. By excluding his granddaughter and using money that belonged to her future, Dad's voice carried an edge I'd never heard before. Jessica, what were you thinking? Emma tugged on Dad's shirt. Grandpa, are you mad about my card? No, sweetheart, Dad said, his voice breaking slightly. Your card is perfect. I'm not mad at you at all. I pulled up the final piece of documentation, my grandfather's personal letter about family integrity and protecting vulnerable members. Grandpa saw this coming, I said. He structured my inheritance specifically to prevent financial manipulation within the family. He wanted me to have the resources to maintain family relationships on my own terms while protecting Emma from exactly what happened tonight. The letter's words about family members who control others through financial pressure hit the assembled crowd like a slap. Several relatives who had participated in Jessica's narrative about my irresponsibility looked genuinely ashamed. Jessica, I said finally, you've spent 8 months telling everyone that I was financially irresponsible while secretly stealing my inheritance and excluding my daughter from family gatherings. You've damaged my relationships with extended family based on lies you created to justify taking money that belonged to Emma's future. Derek was staring at his wife with growing horror as he realized the scope of her deception. Jessica, you told me the estate attorney recommended family management of Patrick's inheritance. You said Patrick had requested our help with financial planning. I was making decisions in everyone's best interest, Jessica said desperately. Patrick was struggling, and someone needed to ensure that important family events could happen without financial stress or complicated logistics. Complicated logistics like including Grandpa's granddaughter in his birthday celebration, I asked. The devastation was complete. Jessica's manipulation had been exposed in front of extended family business associates, and most importantly, in front of the father she'd claimed to honor with her sophisticated planning. Emma slid down from Dad's lap and walked over to me, taking my hand. "Daddy, can we still have birthday cake with Grandpa?" Her innocent question cut through all the adult complexity and returned focus to what the evening should have been about. Dad's eyes filled with tears as he looked at his granddaughter, the child Jessica had tried to exclude from his celebration. "Of course we can have birthday cake, sweetheart," I said. "In fact, I think it's time to show everyone what Grandpa's birthday should really look like." The reckoning was complete, but the healing was just beginning. The silence that followed Emma's simple request for birthday cake lasted several heartbeats before Dad stood up, his decision clear in his expression. "You know what, Emma? You're absolutely right. This is supposed to be a birthday party, and birthday parties should include the people who love you most." He walked over to where Jessica stood, frozen, her face a mixture of shame and defiance. "Sweetheart, I need you to understand something. The most valuable thing about tonight isn't the elegant decorations or the sophisticated menu. It's having my family together, especially my granddaughter." Jessica's composure finally cracked completely. "Dad, I just wanted to give you something special. I wanted to create a celebration that honored your accomplishments and brought the family together in a meaningful way." By excluding Emma? Dad's voice was gentle but firm. "By telling lies about your brother and stealing money that belonged to your niece's future? That's not bringing family together, Jessica. That's tearing family apart." Derek stepped forward, his face pale with embarrassment. "Mr. Harrison, I need to apologize. I believed Jessica's version of Patrick's situation, and I supported decisions that were completely unfair to both Patrick and Emma. I appreciate that, Derek, but the real apologies need to go to my son and granddaughter." Emma tugged on Dad's jacket. "Grandpa, I don't want people to be sad at your birthday party. Can we just have cake and be happy?" Her 7-year-old wisdom cut through the adult complexity with startling clarity. This was supposed to be a celebration, not a confrontation, and my daughter was trying to restore joy to her grandfather's special evening. "Emma's right," I said, making a decision that surprised even myself. "Jessica, Derek, I'm not interested in pursuing legal action or demanding immediate financial restitution, but there are going to be some changes in how our family operates." I pulled out my phone and opened the resort's event management app, which David had shown me earlier. "First, we're going to modify tonight's celebration. David, please open the lakeside dining room to all resort guests. Any family that was displaced by our exclusive booking should be invited to join us with dinner on the house." David smiled, already pulling out his own tablet. "I'll make those arrangements immediately, Mr. Sullivan." Second, I continued, "Jessica and Derek, you're going to attend family counseling sessions focused on communication and trust. The cost will come out of the money you owe to Grandpa's estate, which means you'll be paying for your own education about healthy family dynamics." Jessica looked like she wanted to protest, but Derek put his hand on her arm. "That's more than fair, Patrick. We clearly need help understanding how to be better family members. Third, you're both going to write personal apologies to Emma, not to me, but to her. She's the one who was excluded from her grandfather's birthday party, and she deserves to understand that what happened to her was wrong." Emma looked up at me with confusion. "Do they not like me?" The question broke something in Jessica's expression. She knelt down to Emma's level, tears beginning to flow. "Oh, sweetheart, of course I like you. I love you so much. Aunt Jessica made some very bad decisions, and I hurt your feelings when I was trying to plan something special for Grandpa." "Did I do something wrong?" Emma asked, her innocence making the question even more devastating. "No, baby, you didn't do anything wrong," Jessica said, her voice breaking. "Aunt Jessica forgot what's really important about family parties." Dad wiped his eyes, clearly moved by watching his daughter take responsibility for her mistakes. "Emma, would you help Grandpa with something important?" "What?" "I want to change this party so it's the kind of celebration great-grandpa would have loved. He always said the best parties were when all the generations could enjoy themselves together. Can you help me make sure tonight is that kind of party? Emma brightened immediately. Can we invite the kids I met at the game room, and can we move some tables so families can sit together? That's exactly what we're going to do, I said. David, can we rearrange the seating to accommodate families and make this more of a community celebration? Absolutely. We can combine your private dining with our Saturday evening family service. It'll create a much more inclusive atmosphere. Over the next hour, the entire character of the evening transformed. Families who had been displaced by Jessica's exclusive booking joined the celebration, bringing children who immediately gravitated toward Emma. The jazz quartet adapted their playlist to include more interactive music that engaged multiple generations. Sarah approached me during the transition, her embarrassment evident. Patrick, I owe you a huge apology. I completely believed Jessica's story about your situation, and I treated you like someone who needed pity rather than respect. Sarah, I understand why you believed her. Jessica is convincing, and she positioned herself as the responsible family member managing a crisis. But I should have talked to you directly instead of accepting secondhand information about your life. You're right, and I appreciate you acknowledging that. Going forward, maybe we could maintain our relationship directly, instead of filtering everything through other family members. The conversation represented exactly what I'd hoped would emerge from this confrontation. Family members taking responsibility for their choices and committing to more honest communication. By the time we reached the birthday cake ceremony, the dining room was filled with laughter and genuine connection. Emma had made friends with several other children, and Dad was beaming as he watched multiple generations of both family and resort guests celebrating together. Before I blow out my candles, Dad announced, I want to say something important. Tonight started with hurt feelings and misunderstandings, but it's ending with exactly what a birthday should be: people who care about each other, choosing to enjoy each other's company. He looked directly at Emma. My beautiful granddaughter reminded us that birthdays are about love and cake and being happy together. That's a lesson her great-grandfather would have been proud to see her teach. Emma clapped enthusiastically as Dad blew out his 60 candles, her earlier confusion replaced by pure joy at seeing her grandfather happy. During the cake service, Derek pulled me aside for a private conversation. Patrick, I need you to know that Jessica's deception about your financial situation affected more than just family relationships. I made some business decisions based on what I thought was your vulnerability, and those decisions weren't ethical. What kind of decisions? I recommended insurance policies for you that included higher premiums because I believed you were financially unstable and represented a higher risk. I also discussed your supposed situation with other agents as an example of how family support could influence coverage decisions. The confession revealed another layer of how Jessica's lies had affected my life in ways I hadn't even realized. Derek, I appreciate your honesty about this. I want to make it right. I'll review your coverage and ensure you're getting appropriate rates, and I'll correct the misinformation I shared with other professionals. As the evening wound down, Jessica found a quiet moment to approach Emma and me together. Patrick, I know apologies aren't enough to fix what I've done. I convinced myself that I was protecting family interests, but I was really protecting my own need to be in control. Emma looked up at her aunt with the directness that only children possess. Why did you say I couldn't come to Grandpa's party? Because I thought adult parties should only have adults, and I forgot that you're one of the most important people in Grandpa's life. I made a mistake and I hurt your feelings. Are you going to remember that I'm important next time? Yes, sweetheart. I'm going to remember that family parties should include all the family, especially you. Emma considered this seriously before nodding. Okay. Do you want to color with me sometime I have new markers? The innocence of her forgiveness brought tears to Jessica's eyes. I would love to color with you, Emma. As we prepared to leave, David presented me with a comprehensive report on the resort's operations and my responsibilities as owner. Your grandfather would be proud of how you handled this situation, he said. He always believed that the best business decisions were the ones that brought people together rather than driving them apart. Emma fell asleep in the car on the drive home, exhausted by the emotional intensity of the evening, but secure in the knowledge that her family loved her and wanted her present at important celebrations. The life lesson my grandfather had intended came through clearly. Real strength isn't about controlling others or manipulating circumstances to match your preferences. Real strength is about protecting the most vulnerable members of your family while maintaining your own integrity, even when that requires difficult conversations and uncomfortable confrontations. Jessica had learned that demanding harmony through exclusion and deception ultimately destroys the very relationships she'd claimed to protect. Dad had learned to distinguish between sophisticated planning and genuine family connection. And I had learned that my grandfather's gift wasn't just financial security, it was the tools necessary to ensure that Emma would always know her place in our family was valued and protected. Most importantly, Emma had learned that when adults make mistakes, they can acknowledge those mistakes and work to fix them. She had seen her family choose love over pride, inclusion, over exclusivity, and honesty over comfortable deception. The evening ended not with the sophisticated elegance Jessica had planned, but with something far more valuable: a family that had chosen to grow through conflict rather than be destroyed by it. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where someone's attempt to help you actually made things worse because they acted on assumptions rather than asking what you actually needed? I'd love to hear your stories about family dynamics and how you've navigated complex relationships in the comments below. If this story resonated with you and reminded you of the importance of protecting family relationships while standing up for what's right, please give it a like to help others find this message. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about finding strength in difficult family situations, and share this with someone who might need the reminder that real family includes everyone, especially the most vulnerable members. Thank you for joining me on this journey through a difficult but ultimately healing family confrontation. May we all have the wisdom to recognize when love requires us to have difficult conversations and the courage to choose inclusion over convenience in our own family relationships.